So everything has been really good the last couple weeks. Well, I'd say this last week I kind of eased back into training. I went down to some gyms close by to where I live, like 40 minutes, hour away, to a buddy that I know. So I trained with him, which was real fun. Learned some real cool stuff from this guy that was there as well. And jumped around both gyms. Up here that I'm going to be training at. Um, and it kind of made me realize a few things that I already was like leaning towards. I was already kind of like getting to a point where I wasn't really enjoying, in a grappling sense, enjoying the way class is structured. Just because a lot of gyms will generalize the curriculum, and it's usually like going to be catered to the general public. So um, there's some gyms that I think have the exception depending on the level of skill there and the coaches and stuff and that sort of thing. But in flag, I've noticed it's catered towards more beginners, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it feels like a waste of time when I show up somewhere for an hour and I'm drilling something that I don't want to be drilling, or something that I'm doing, but I can tell is like a low percentage move that is not going to really work against anyone with a good skill set. Where it just kind of feels like a waste of time. I'm spending like an hour just like not even actually drilling it either. It's like a lot of it is fluff. A lot of it is like the coach talking or showing how to do the move, answering questions, and then you spend like a quick, 4 or 5 minutes drilling it back and forth, but that's not enough time. So even if it was something that I really liked, it just feels like it's not a proper way to structure your training after a certain point. I think for at first it makes total sense, and it really is like it just makes sense. I understand why it is the way it is. But after just kind of like taking some more grappling classes around town and like being shown stuff that I don't really resonate with, and just in a class that I also don't resonate with, it made me realize that I need to prioritize what I was like this thing that I was doing. I was getting together with, people, usually one other person, for like, 30, 40 minutes to an hour, and I was drilling things that I wanted to drill. And I could just get so much out of that session because it's like it was something that I wanted to work on. It's something that I think I needed to work on. And two, there's no fluff. It's just I just get to instantly take someone and just use their body for like an insane amount of time within that hour. Where it's like when I look at the like benefit of that hour relative to the benefit of the hour in a generalized class, the hour that is spent drilling one on one with someone, knowing what I need to work on, I get an exponential amount more out of that session than I would a generalized class, especially if it's like, say, I'm working on my wrestling. If I happen to be drilling with someone that is also a good wrestler, because then when I'm doing stuff, they can point out like, hey, you need to take a deeper penetration step. You need to turn your hips this way, like just stuff like that, where they can also help me direct that way. So I think there's a quality of partner that I can kind of pick as well. And yeah, I think this last week it just made me more confident in a grappling sense, not a striking sense, because I'm still a beginner in striking, and like the classes, they're like just taking classes in that generalized sense are actually perfect for me right now in a striking sense. So I'm gonna be doing the striking classes, taking that a couple times a week, and then I'm gonna be just meeting up with my buddies like just start scheduling it to where we get together and we just work and we just drill what we want to work on. So I feel really good about that. I feel like I'm actually I've been talking to my close friends and family about how the whole coach student dynamic, it feels like kind of like necessary at first. Like when you don't know anything, you need someone to be able to show you the ropes, or else you're gonna stumble for a long time, and it's gonna take you a long time to get the fundamentals down. But after a certain point, it feels like it starts to become a little bit obsolete in the sense that you, like for my grappling, like conceptually, I can approach something, an issue I'm having, and I can troubleshoot that using YouTube. I could ask literally anyone. Like it doesn't have to be a coach. Like I can learn things from anyone around me that is also a grappler. Because there's things that like white belts do or blue belts do, and there's things that obviously black belts do. Like they all have things that they do and that they're good at. And so, if someone's giving you grief in a certain position and they're a white or they're a belt, like they're just in a skill level where like you're dominating them everywhere except this position, then you can ask them and be like, "What's happening here? What are you doing?" And then you learn. And it's like that's not a coach student relationship. That's a peer to peer relationship. And I think it just like I think it just feels weird having someone, and I'm referring to my old coach now, like thinking about kind of our dynamic. It's weird having a relationship with someone where they think they know what's best for you when you've gotten to a point where you know what's best for you. And there's obviously things that he could show me or teach me that like I might not have known if he didn't. But there's this imbalance of like relationship that just felt like very off. It didn't feel very it didn't feel natural. It felt very inorganic and just like this pressure. It's very odd. Um, but there's so many ways that you can just facilitate your own learning. And like I said, you have to build a base of fundamentals, and you have to be at a point where you can like watch, like I would say a good mile marker is to be able to watch like a high level grappling match and to be able to understand what's going on just by watching it. But and it doesn't happen the first time around. I have to like scrub these videos where I'm just like I'll screen save it and then I'll just slowly watch it back and forth just to see what each like what their body parts are doing. And then once you get that, you're like, "Oh, that's like I see what they're doing. I see why it's working." So it's almost like getting fluent in a language and you don't know all the words, but you can see people talking and then you can understand what they mean by watching them speak the language, you know? So it's like even at first, if I don't understand like a word, which you could think of as like a move that they're doing, I can look at that word or that move in the context that it's being used in. And then you can understand that word or move through that context, because it's like you can look at the position that they're in. You can look at where their hands are. You could look at where their feet are. You could look at, okay, well, he's winning these battles. He has an underhook. He has good head position. He has, you know, the list of things is checked off, but then you can see maybe his leg is caught in a certain position. And then you can see like he does something that you've never seen before and then he frees the leg. Well, it's like, okay, well, he did something to free that leg. What was it? And then you look at all the little nuances in his body, his or her body and what they're doing, and then you can kind of slowly pick it apart just by watching it back and forth in slow motion. So it's like I think that's for me that's like where I've really started to progress myself is utilizing YouTube where I'm watching and I'm not like looking up a lot of the time like how to do certain moves. Like I'm just watching high level. I'm not doing specifically grappling. I'm watching high level MMA fights, and I'm like picking people that are good at certain things, and I'll watch that. So I think it's just that to me was a mile marker where I was like, oh, I can really learn from just YouTube. So that I think is important in this process is to feel confident that you can actually absorb information at like a good pace from, you know, resources around you. Because if you can't decipher the information from YouTube or from the people around you, like someone does something really cool, like you're not gonna want to branch off on your own. I think. Kind of just like rambled there. I forget what point I was making. It's just like all tied to feeling like I don't want to have a singular coach anymore. I think if I run into someone that's really dope, I'd be down, you know, to have them as like a grappling coach. Like there's coaches that stick out in my mind in the past that I've had that were just this like well of information and also were like well put together in a coaching context. You know, it felt very clean. Like we're all human, so we're all flawed. You know, so I don't know what I'm thinking of my wrestling coach specifically from Vegas. Like I don't know what the rest of his life was like how well put together his life was. But in a coaching context, he had just like got it. You know, he was really good at coaching. He had clean intentions. It's like that's someone that I could see like, you know, creating that student coach relationship because I could learn endlessly from him. He was like in his 30s and he had spent his whole life grappling. So it's like I'll always have stuff to learn from them, you know. I'm just like not interested in the whole them knowing what's better for me. That just feels so odd because at the end of the day, like as long as you're reflecting on your training, and I think recording it helps. I record my training. I can see what I'm doing that's wrong, you know. Like when I'm striking, I can see like that just doesn't look right. You know, like you could see it. It's like I'm dropping my hand, my feet aren't moving. They don't look like they're moving right. You know, you can just like see things and you can kind of pick up like I think I need to like rethink how I'm moving or I need to ask, you know, a striking coach or just a good striker in general. I just need to ask them like, "Hey, I'm doing this and I'm running into this. How do I solve this?" You know, and same with my grappling. You know, I could watch things that I'm doing if someone's stuffing my takedowns consistently and then I see how I'm entering into them, it's like, well, that was the problem, you know. And it's almost like easier to see it yourself. Like coaches can tell you you're doing something a certain way, but in your head a lot of the time you think you're trying like you think you're doing it that way. You're like, yeah, I am, but you're not, and you don't realize you're not until you see yourself not doing it. So it even is that extra layer of really getting the point across is when you're doing something wrong, you just see it yourself. It's so plain. You know, there's no excuses. There's not like, well, I felt like I was cutting an angle. It's like, no, you just weren't. So that's kind of what's new with like kind of my thoughts this last week is like I said, just generalized wanting to kind of facilitate my own process in a grappling context even further. Um, Reflecting on almost it feels like kind of it's necessary, but it also feels like archaic at the same time, the student coach relationship, especially with just the amount of information on the internet. There's just so much at our disposal that it's like you don't need a coach anymore. Before it was like before there were books, you know, before there was just information at our fingertips, you relied on people to orally um, pass down the information that you were interested in. But now it's like, first there's books, and now just the internet is just insane. When you really think about just the infinite amount of information there is on the internet, like you can learn about anything endlessly. as long as you know how to decipher the information you're looking at, and um, yeah, and that's where I think like watching what people do is like this ties into how I'm deciphering the information. You'll run into videos where people will be teaching things, and a lot of the time they're teaching things that isn't actually how they do the move. They do the move completely differently, but they're not aware that they do the move completely differently. So it's cool because it's like you could just watch high level competition and see what they're doing that works at that level. So you're just seeing their highest percentage moves that they're really good at. And it might be hard to pick on like certain minute details, but you can get the general structure of the move that they're doing. So yeah, I'm really excited. It feels like a nice transition into like a new period of kind of how I want to approach and spend my time training. So I feel excited. It's just getting people. I'd say the hardest part is getting people to actually show up. You know, is having training partners that actually want to do the same sort of work, as well as having the motivation to do it on a somewhat consistent basis. You know, and that's fine. You know, at the end of the day, like that part is outside of my control. So when there's like times where my partners either can't show up or don't show up, you know, that's where I can just hit the bags and drill certain things I want to drill by myself in a striking context. Because grappling, you really need someone else for the most part. But striking, it's like I could work on my footwork. I could just clean up, you know, certain combos on the bag. So either way, I'll be able to make it productive any training session that I'm doing. So yeah, it's good. That's kind of what's new. I just felt like sharing that. It was kind of a lot. Felt like I rambled a bit, but I think it's because I'm processing a lot right now. Just kind of mentally, I'm chewing on these ideas and fleshing them out while I'm talking about them. So that's good. I feel good.